If you don't stop screaming, I'm going to take away your blah, blah, blah. What did you just teach? You taught him nothing. Hello. That was weird. Hello. Hello. How many hellos? Okay, I think we should talk more about supporting a child through mental health struggles. And I was thinking, well, one of the things I got a lot of questions about was like, can you give me some practical things I can do? So I feel like let's talk about some practical things we can do when our children are struggling. Obviously, and I've talked about this so much, like we need to come from a place of curiosity, right? Instead of assumption. And we need to make sure we're not paying attention to just surface level behaviors and really digging deep down and all that. But then what about like in everyday life? What can you do? So I actually had a one-on-one call with a woman. I don't even know if I ever told you this. I was basically like mentoring this mom.
Okay.
That through a friend that, long story short, but basically a friend of mine told me there was this mom whose son was struggling and she needed somebody. And I was like, make sure she knows I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. Blah, blah, blah. I'm just a mom.
Right.
She was like, no, she basically just needs a mom to sort of help her through these days. And there are so many things about her son that reminded me of the things that I was going through with Luca. And so I gave her some tips that really worked. It was amazing. Like
okay.
I told her to do some things and then the next sentence she was like, oh my gosh, this made such a difference. So I thought we should share those because they're things that people can start now, like immediately. One of the things I told her is her kids' struggles, and we've talked about before how different kids, their struggles show in different ways, right? But a lot of times with teenagers, it'll be unhealthy or rebellious behavior or some choices that could be dangerous or, you know, just unhealthy in general choices, right? And so what happens is we start labeling these kids, or these kids start seeing themselves as just a problem, right? I'm a problem, I'm a bad kid. So what I said is no matter what, even on the worst days, I want you to catch him doing good. And I think sometimes if we have a kid who's just a lot of work and a lot, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a teenager, right? Like a young, who's just a lot of work and it's always something and they're always giving us attitude and we're always having to like tell them 10 times to please do their homework and don't be late to class and don't forget this and stop screaming at me and, you know, be respectful and you can't be drinking or doing, right? It just, that sort of becomes the relationship.
Right.
And so I said, catch him doing good. I want you to literally compliment him about stuff that you don't even think about. You know, like he gets out of bed, great. Be like, you know what? Life is so hard sometimes. And even for me, it's sometimes just hard to get out of bed. You're awesome. Like you could have stayed in bed all day and you got out of bed. Amazing. Like high five, because it was hard for me to get out of bed today. I mean, you can find a way to say, you know, your kid in a way that's not like cheesy or tacky or like my mom is crazy right now.
Sure.
But I feel like we forget sometimes with kids who are struggling to catch them doing good.
This works great with my 5-year-old, honestly.
See?
He's just got ADD, but if we catch him doing something good, it's like it boosts his confidence, and then he does the next thing good, and the next thing good, and the next thing good.
Yes.
It's like a domino effect almost.
And by the way, it's same way domino effect if we're constantly criticizing them, because what happens is they take on that identity, and if I'm a problem, well, I'm going to make problematic choices. Well, if I'm a bad kid, sure, I'll play that role. I'll be a bad kid. So I'm going to make these, you know, choices and do these things that quote unquote are labeled as bad. So it's a domino effect both ways. And I think we have so much power as parents to empower them. I mean, it works for adults too, right? You hear somebody tells you that it could be something silly. Like they tell you they really like your glasses. You're going to wear those glasses more often.
Right?
You will, right?
So true.
Oh, I really like your hair down. All of a sudden you're wearing your hair down all the time, right? Or if at work, you know, man, you really spoke up in that meeting and I loved what you had to say. You're going to be like, I'm going to speak up in every meeting. I'm going to have brilliant things to say in every meeting. So same with kids, catch them doing good. So the one thing, and it was interesting when I was meeting with this mom, she was like, well, that would be really hard. There's just not much good. And I was like, oh, here's the problem. You're the problem. And I was really blunt with her because I was like, I'm gonna be blunt with you because I've made all the mistakes. I have been a really not healthy, good parent many days. But if you are listening and you're like, no, my kid, seriously, there's nothing good. I need you to check yourself because you are living with a lot of anger and resentment, and you got to heal some of that because I don't believe you. I do not believe that there's nothing good in your child. I believe there are. I really don't believe.
And I also think that we just don't notice it because, like, I'm sorry, I'm going back to my 5-year-old because that's what I know. I all I can see is the hard things and the things that I want fixed.
Yes.
But if I'm looking for those good things, they're all over the place.
Yes. It's kind of like in our days, especially for us, like I call myself a recovering pessimist. It's so easy to see the bad, right? And I'm one of those people, I still have to work on it, but I used to be really bad at this where if something bad happened, I would milk those 5 minutes all day. Like I'm going to be telling you about, like it's 5 p.m. and I'm going to tell you about something that happened at 8 a.m. Even if it lasted 5 minutes, I'm going to be like, you will not believe, this ruined my whole day. The rest of the day might have been great. But those 5 minutes, that person said this to me or they cut me off or they judged me about this and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be milking that for days sitting in that. But you know what was really hard for me is to learn to milk the good. So on the worst days where everything seemed to be going wrong, could I find the 5 good minutes and milk the 5 good minutes and go, yeah, that was hard and that was stressful. But oh my gosh, those 5 minutes when I was eating that sandwich and my kid came over to me and gave me a hug, woo, that was a good, I'm going to milk. I'm going to call my friends. I'm going to call my neighbors. I'm going to write in my diary. I'm going to tell everybody, I got to tell you about the best 5 minutes of my day. We don't do that, right? We don't tend to do that. Same with our kids. We tend to focus on the negative. And I think a big reason for that is because we live in constant fear of, am I a good enough parent and am I raising good enough kids?
Sure.
And so the good stuff just sort of flies by. We don't even notice it that much. Or it's like, oh, that was nice. And we forget about it 5 minutes later. But man, we see them do one little bad thing and it's like, you know, alarm going off in our head. You're a bad mom. You raised a brat. Your kid will end up in prison. Right? Our anxiety and our insecurities and everything's just screaming at us. So catch them doing good. So the assignment I gave this mom, because she was like having a really hard time finding the good. And she said, well, there's just certain responsibilities that he has to take care of. And so I said, okay, what are they? And she gave them to me and we wrote them down together. And I said, here's what you're going to do. And I did this with Luca and that's how I knew it would work. So I remember one time with Luca, my oldest son, he wanted to earn a certain privilege. And there were certain things that he was just not doing. Like this was at a time where he just was not turning in homework and he just was not doing the you know, taking care of his responsibilities in the house. And so I said, okay, I asked him first, do you want to write this list together of ways you can earn it? And he was like, no, because, you know, he was in his teen struggling mode. So I was like, that's fine. I'll write it down. I'll try to be fair. We can discuss it later if need be. And so I wrote down this list of here are the things that you need to do in order to earn this privilege. And I can't remember what it was. And I clearly remember printing this piece of paper and walking over to his room. Because by the way, it's really good to have stuff in writing.
Sure.
It's good for
good idea.
My brain fog. It's good for my kid has a million things he's thinking. And it's so easy to let go. That's not what you said. You didn't say, you only said those 2 things. You didn't say I had to do the third. It's just easier sometimes to write things down. And also I think it removes a lot of arguments because it's just like, here it is instead of back and forth constant. Anyway, I remember I'm walking to his room with this list of things he needs to do to earn this privilege. And right before I went to knock on his door, I was like, oh, you're doing this all wrong, Kristina. You are doing this so wrong. And I went back, ripped up that piece of paper. I went back to my computer and I wrote a much longer list that I started with all the things he was already thriving at and doing right. And I made sure that that list was longer than the list of things he needed to get done. And so, you know, it's just this long list. And went into his room. And some of the things people might be like, that's a given that your kid should do that. Don't look at it that way, okay? Like we all love compliments for the smallest things.
But what's an example of one of the givens that you put on the list?
Like, I saw the way you were really sweet with your little brother last night. Just a moment I caught him in of just him being really sweet with his brother. I wrote that down, you know? Or you know what? You got up for school today. That's definitely a given. But you know what? When a kid is struggling, and especially with him when he was skipping school some days, that was great. You got up. And if he didn't that day, then I probably wrote, hey, on Monday, you got up and you went to school. It was 5 days ago, right? But anyway, I wrote, and I made sure to write it in a way that was like, I'm really proud of you because I know that it's hard sometimes to get out of bed. Like really, you write it in a genuine, sweet way, right? And I gave him this list, and I'm telling you, this kid got that stuff done because he was not handed a list of, basically, if you write him a list of like all the things he needed to get done, they really were highlighting all the things he hadn't already been doing, right? So it's basically handing him a list of his failures. Instead, this kid got to read almost twice as many compliments. And so he was still on this high from that. And then he read the things. So anyway, I tell this mom that I'm mentoring, or whatever you want to call it, to do this with her son. And she was like, okay, but I'm telling you, he's just going to rip it out. Like she just had a very negative attitude about her kid. And I get it. It's exhausting sometimes, especially if you've been parenting a child who's struggling for years. You sort of lose hope, right? And so she was like, all right. I said, please just do it. Please, please, please. So I kind of helped her write it. I told her to add more, blah, blah, blah. So I think a week or two went by before we met again. And we meet. And she's like, oh my gosh, you will not believe what happened. I gave him that list and he kind of ripped it out of my hand and then he shut the door and I didn't think he cared. And she goes, later on, I see him FaceTiming his girlfriend and he's literally reading her the list I wrote and he's beaming and he's happy. And she's like almost crying, telling me, like there's tears in her eyes. She's like, I couldn't believe it. Like I thought it would mean nothing to him. I'm like, he is a 15-year-old, or I don't remember, it's 15 or 16-year-old boy who wants his mom's love so much. He doesn't show it to you. He might not tell you, Mom, I really need you. But man, when do we ever stop wanting our mom's love?
Right?
Like that doesn't
never.
end. I don't care if you're 90.
Please tell
Do you
me
know what I mean?
never.
Like you want that. And so she was just shocked. And then same thing happened where she said he really took those other responsibilities seriously and wanted to do them. And I'm like, yeah, because you empowered him. And I think it's so important, especially with kids who are struggling. Look for the good, find the good, say the good, write it down. I've even, one thing I did that I think made a big difference, and I think everybody should do this. In fact, everybody who's listening, I don't even care if your kid's not struggling. I want you to do this. Get a bunch of Post-its and write down compliments on them and just put them all over your kid's room. Put one in the backpack. If you're worried that your kid will be made fun of at school, maybe don't do that. They're going to see it. But put it in their bathroom, on the mirror, put it on their pillow, put it on their video game thing, put it wherever. Just a bunch of Post-its, just complimenting them. Especially a kid who is quote unquote rebellious, a kid who is struggling, a kid who sees themselves as a problem, or teachers or other adults in their life see them as a problem. They need to know that they are good. And it is so easy and it's free and it's something we can do immediately. It's so little, but it is so powerful to just compliment our child. And again, you can compliment them verbally, but there's also something
about writing it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this mom was shocked that this kid kept that list on his desk nonstop. Like she thought that thing would end up in the trash and he kept it. So I think that's a really big thing. And again, even if you don't have a kid who's struggling, look for the good,
Totally.
and point it out. And I think the Post-it thing, we should all just be
It's a
like
great idea.
showering our kids with Post-its.
You could do it for your spouse too.
Yeah.
That might make them really happy.
One time for one Valentine's Day for Philip, on his bathroom mirror, he has his own bathroom mirror, I put Post-its, but they were in the shape of a heart.
Oh, cute.
And every Post-it said something that I really respect and admire about him. So instead of just I love you or you're cute, I kind of wanted to go a little deeper. And he still has that stack, not on his mirror because I literally cover the mirror, but he still has that stack of Post-its. But one thing I learned also from speaking with that mom, and I saw myself in her so much, is she was really, first of all, she was making a lot of assumptions, right? About my kid is not going to like that list and my kid I can't find anything. So stop with that. And then two, she was really attaching her own value to her child's struggles and setbacks. I think one of the hardest yet most important things as parents is we have to stop attaching our value to whatever is going on with our child. And that's hard because the minute we have that kid, we get real enmeshed, right? But if you are attaching your value to their struggles and their setbacks, first of all, it's cruel to you, right? Because as much as we'd like to think that we have all this control, we don't. We don't. The best of parents will raise a child who might make really, really, really bad decisions in life. And then you hear about these kids who are thriving and amazing and changing the world and grew up with awful, awful, awful abusive parents. All that to say, we only have so much control, right?
Right.
So stop attaching your value to their struggles. It's cruel to you because you end up blaming yourself. You end up constantly feeling like, how is this my fault? And beating yourself up. That's not helping support your child. Your child doesn't need somebody who's constantly just like carrying this heavy burden of being hard on themselves. Also not a great example for our kids, right?
Right.
If that's what they're seeing as their guide. But also, it's unfair to our kid. It's unfair to our kid. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had the conversation with my oldest son where he would tell me that he would see me live in fear or struggle or maybe blame myself or whatever because of something that was happening with him. And he carried that. He's like, it's my fault that my mom is constantly living in fear. It's my fault that my mom feels guilty about this thing, or she thinks she wasn't a good enough mother and that's why I made this choice. It's my fault. And yet I'm a kid who is struggling with serious depression and I don't know how to fix myself or heal myself or change. They carry this burden. So for the health of us, our own health, and for the health of our child, stop attaching your value.
Right.
It's really hard to do, but we have to do it. Okay, this is another one that I was trying to, we don't have to keep talking about that specific mom, but because all of this stuff is stuff I've had to work on and I still struggle with. Being emotionally available without being emotionally reactive. This is not easy. This is very, very difficult, people. When you have a teenager who is screaming in your face, who is acting in a way that you're like, I can't even believe, I used to judge people whose kids acted that way, and now it's happening to me. By the way, I have a theory.
Yeah.
If you judge a parent, if you're like a non-parent yet, and you're judging a parent for their kid behaving a certain way, your kid's going to be worse at that exact thing.
It's called karma.
Yes. In fact, that's my prayer every night. Please, dear God, that parent that said, my kid will never do such and such, please, God, make sure that that person's kid does such and such and then some. So being emotionally available and not emotionally reactive, this is so hard because what would happen is if my kid, when he was struggling, would be, screaming at me or yelling or even just like frustratingly crying or whatever, my energy would match that. Especially if he was screaming something awful at me. My energy would be like, you can't speak to me that way. And blah, blah, blah. Right. It was that same, and what happens? Now you have two people who are screaming.
Yes.
And A, not helpful, no progress probably done. And B, beyond just being like a good support system for him, I'm trying to help him with his mental health. My job as a parent is also to model for him how to behave when life gets messy and loud and difficult and complicated. And my modeling sucked, right? When I would meet him with that same energy, my modeling sucked because I'm basically telling him, don't scream at me while I'm screaming.
Right.
I'm basically asking him to stay calm and speak calmly while I'm not even able to control my own emotions, right? So that took a lot of therapy and a lot of work on myself. And that also has to do with making sure that I'm not attaching my value to whatever he's saying, whatever's happening with him. Because if I'm attaching my value to it, then I'm immediately going to start being defensive or, you know what I mean? Like it's going to show up in ugly ways.
I've said this before, but it's like a roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
Their emotions are a roller coaster and you can hop on and you can match their emotions and go for a little ride where you don't want to go. But it's better if you keep your feet on the ground. Then you're not joining in and you can see more clearly to be able to address whatever their emotions are.
Yeah. And that's a really good way of putting it. And the first way I switched it, which I guess was progress, but not ideal, is I would just say, you can't talk to me like that. And I would walk away. And I wouldn't scream it. I would just say, you can't talk to me that way. And I would walk away. And I realized that's not helpful either. So what I found to be most helpful in those cases, and by the way, if you're going through this now and your kid is screaming at you and all that stuff, I just want to give you some hope. I can't remember the last time my son, and by the way, for years it was a daily thing. I cannot remember the last time he's 22 now. I can't remember the last time he screamed at me like that. It's been years of him speaking to me kindly when he's frustrated, of him being really sweet and warm and huggy. I could cry right now saying this because we didn't have that for a long time. So I just want to give you some hope. But this is what I started saying to him that really helped. I would say, I'm really interested in what you have to say. Let's revisit this when we're both calm. And then I would initiate that conversation. So what this did is set that boundary. I'm not going to let him scream at me like this, right? But I'm going to validate him because I know that while he's screaming awful things at me, what he's really screaming at, and we talked about this before, is help me. I'm hurting. I'm in pain. Help me. I know that it's a cry for help, right? But I'm still not going to allow him to disrespect me. So I'm going to end the conversation, but I'm going to make sure I tell him, I'm interested in what you have to say. I really want to hear it. And then instead of going, you can't talk to me that way, because I don't want to, again, just make him a problem, because then he's probably not going to open up to me later. And I need him to open up, because the only way I can learn how to help him is if he opens up. I'm going to say, let's revisit this when we're both calm. And then by me initiating that conversation later when he's calm, what that's saying is to him is, I am worth coming back for. She actually genuinely cares. She's not just trying to shut me up and shut me out. So I would wait. And when I saw that he was calm, I would go and I would say, is this a good time to talk? And sometimes he would say, no. And I would say, all right. And I would wait and ask him again later. So a lot of times he would come to me in the meantime. But that changed everything.
That's great
Deciding
advice.
that I was not going to scream back. I was not going to raise my voice. But I was also not just going to be like, you can't talk to me that way and walk away. By him, and I know there are people that are going to listen to this and they're going to go, oh my gosh, this is that stupid gentle parenting. And oh my gosh, you're allowing him to disrespect you. And oh my God. Okay, listen, if you want to punish your kid and throw a bunch of consequences at them, great, good job. Do it if it works for you. Did not work for my family. I don't even want to say good job because I don't think it's a good job, but it did not work for my family. What worked for my family, what worked for my son choosing to focus on his healing, and what got us to a point where he now respects me and talks to me kindly, and we have a very close relationship, is him feeling like I was a safe place, that I genuinely cared, and that he could open up to me. So
and maybe also that you forgave him when he did mess up, because he's 14, 15, 16, and we make bad decisions. So of course they're gonna make bad decisions when they're 14, 15, 16. And I think it's important, even with little kids too, that even when you mess up or you say something, I can forgive you and we can move past it.
Exactly.
And I don't think it's right.
Right. And what happened, because of the way I changed it to, again, I'm interested in what you have to say. Let's revisit this when we're both calm so we can have a productive conversation, and then come back to him. What happened most of the time, now I would say towards the end, it happened all the time, but even the first few times, he so often would start by apologizing and saying, I'm sorry I yelled. That was not a good way to handle it. And I was able to say, you know what, bud, I've yelled at you so many times and I am so sorry. I think it's so important, as much as it's important for us to forgive our children for the things they've done. My gosh, I still have to apologize to my kids all the time, because, I lose my patience, or I say something I shouldn't, or I'm half listening to them because I'm on my phone. So many times I'll pause and be like, you know what? I'm so sorry. You were trying to open up to me, and I was like looking at you, but I was also looking back at my phone. I should have just put my phone away and given you my full attention. Will you please forgive me? This stuff is so important, because we're modeling for them that apologizing is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. So anyway, learning to be emotionally available, not emotionally reactive. Really, 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 really important. And then also, I think one of the reasons the punishments don't work is because they're more, usually they're about power, and they're about just like stopping a certain behavior, but they're not about going underneath and dealing with the root of the problem and then figuring out what the next step is. Think about the word discipline, right? Discipline means learning, right? To teach. So if we're going to discipline our kids, we're supposed to teach them. By just saying, now I'm taking away your phone because you did this, or now I'm grounding you because you did this, or now you're going into the naughty corner. That's not teaching them anything, right? That's just like throwing a consequence. But what are they learning? Our kids are sponges. They need to learn.
So what would you do then? Are you saying no consequences? Or are you saying a consequence with a point? What are you saying exactly?
I'm saying, there are boundaries that need to be set, right? For example, we had to take my son's phone away because we found out that he was actually finding ways on Snapchat to buy drugs. So the consequence for his own safety is we took it away. I later gave him just a dumb phone, which we need to talk about that too at some point, why it's really important that your kid has some kind of phone. But there are times when you're going to have to set a boundary or set a consequence. But if I had just done that without dealing with the root of the problem, without having that discussion, without validating him, without creating a space where he is going to come and open up to me, without owning my own stuff, without detaching my value, all that stuff, right? Without all of that stuff, it's not going to work. And by the way, when he's screaming at me, if I just throw punishment at him, what is this teaching him? Isn't it like way bigger of a teaching moment for me to respond in a calm way? And then when he's open to a talk and say, hey, like after having this productive conversation, say, hey, do you see how far we've come now and how we could really get through to each other? And I was able to hear what you had to say, and you were able to hear my point of view, and we were able to make a decision together because we talk calmly. We're teaching them, right? This is how you're going to actually take some steps forward, by having these constructive conversations, not yelling. But if he's just yelling and I'm just throwing a punishment at him, he's not learning anything.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is like a punishment in isolation is kind of useless and worthless.
And when a kid is severely depressed, sometimes actually can
be harmful.
Make things worse. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe even a consequence or just talking about it is actually productive.
Yes, and I think that everything needs to be a teaching moment. Mm-hmm. There needs to be, if you're just throwing a consequence and there isn't a teaching moment, there isn't an actual lesson where you're talking through it, where the kid is actually understanding what is happening, also teaching them what are the next right steps. What are the next right steps? How do we right this thing that whatever happened? Like whether it's you need to apologize to so-and-so because of the way whatever you acted, or you need to make sure you make up these assignments. Like what are the next right steps? Just walking through processing more than just, well, here's your punishment. Which I think is sort of easy. I don't call it lazy parenting, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
And especially with little kids, little kids, their brains aren't like, we tell them to stop screaming. They don't even know why they're screaming. No. They can't even process their emotions. Like, let's talk through it. Let's teach them how to handle all those crazy emotions instead of just saying, if you don't stop screaming, I'm going to take away your blah, blah, blah. What did you just teach? You taught them nothing. You literally taught them nothing.
I think I said that yesterday. No, I'm just kidding.
I've said it many times. Again, this is all about us learning together. I also want to say, as far as the learning thing, no learning can happen in the heat of the moment. And this was my problem. I was very impatient. And so if my son was screaming at me, I would try to give him the lesson then. Because I need to tell him right now that what he's doing is not okay and why it's not okay and why he needs to communicate differently and why blah, 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 blah. Even if I was speaking calmly, I was trying to teach in the heat of the moment. No learning can happen in the heat of the moment. This is where we have to learn to be patient and go, we are going to revisit this moment and this, whatever the lesson is here, we're going to revisit it when we're calm. This is such a huge thing because so many times I really, really wanted to just go off and lecture in the moment. It is not the time to try to give advice to your child in the heat of the moment. They're not going to hear it. And you're probably not going to verbalize it in a way you really want to. So just let yourself take a beat. I mean, so many times in parenting, when something bad happens, we're like, I got to fix this right now. My kid just did this. Let yourself pause. Let yourself take a break. Let yourself breathe through it, think through it, talk to a friend, talk to a therapist, figure it out, and then revisit it. Not everything has to be handled immediately. And that was my problem. I was such an impatient, everything was just an immediate emergency and I have to deal with it right now. And it doesn't have to be.
We did have a question from someone. It's sort of changing the subject a little bit, but it is about supporting a child through mental health. Someone on social media asked this question. My young teenage daughter expressed suicidal thoughts. How do I know if I should put her on medication? It scares me to medicate a teenager who is so young. What would you say?
Yeah, it's really hard because a lot of the psychotropic medications come with a lot of side effects, and it's really whether or not to medicate your child is such a hard and complicated decision, and I am not one to tell you what to do. What I will say though is, number one, I don't think a child should be on medication if they're not also in therapy. A child needs to learn to process things. They need someone to talk to. They need to learn really good skills on how to deal with certain emotions in a healthy way. And I'm a firm believer. I'm sure there are people out there that won't agree with me, but I am a firm believer that if your child is on medication, they should be in some kind of therapy too, whether it's individual therapy, a support group. I'm really big on that. Second of all, when you go to a psychiatrist, if that psychiatrist is not taking a significant amount of time with your child, I would leave. I'll tell you a personal story. And we didn't write about, I wrote about it in the rough draft in the second book, and then it didn't make the final one. And I kind of regret not putting in the final copy because it's really important. So my son, Luca, was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and ADHD. First, he was diagnosed with depression. And then he actually, through a contact we had, he was able to go through this program called CHAMP at UCLA, where weekly he would go in and he would spend hours with a psychiatrist who would take all of these notes. Then she would sit with me and with us together. It was like a really long process. And then she would go to a whole team of doctors who would together discuss his case and blah, blah, blah. And this was a months and months long process. And that's how he got diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and ADHD. And they flat out said, he is not bipolar. Okay. After all these months of talking to him, this is the one thing he does not have that I at one point wondered if he did. So a year or two after this, we show up to this new psychiatrist appointment, and the guy, I'm not kidding you, it was probably 5 or 10 minutes into the session. The guy takes out his little notepad where he's going to write the prescription, and he goes, well, you're bipolar. And he's writing lithium and blah, 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 and all these medications. Thankfully, I was there with him because he was still a minor. And I was like, hold up. He actually went through all of this testing, and they said that he's definitely, with people who had spent months with him. And they said he was not bipolar. And the guy looks at me condescendingly and he goes, I know this is hard for a mother to accept, but this is what it is. And he literally just continues writing.
Wow.
And you know what? All I could think about in that moment, the first thing that came to mind, other than, can we please make sure this person loses his license immediately? Because, by the way, you cannot diagnose someone in 5-10 minutes.
No.
I don't care how great of a doctor you are. You should not be diagnosing anyone with anything that quickly when it comes to mental health. But the thing that actually popped in my head that broke my heart is if I didn't have the experience that I have, and if Luca had not gone through all that testing, I, as a desperate mom who was trying to save my child, would have gone, okay, and would have put my kid on so many heavy medication. By the way, there is no problem with taking certain medications like that if you actually need them. Medications save lives. My son is still on medication, not for bipolar, because that is not his diagnosis, but he is still on an antidepressant. And he is very certain that he needs it. He tried for a little bit without, and he realized, nope, this is something I need. I just kept thinking about that parent who is desperate to save their child, walks into a session like that, and ends up putting their kid on medication that is can be so dangerous. It can be so dangerous. So many side effects.
And I don't know a lot about it, but I feel like it also could have a reverse effect. Like if you're
absolutely
medicating for the wrong thing.
Absolutely. So what I will say is, don't be, I know it's scary to put children on medication. I get it, but don't be closed off completely. Just the same way you wouldn't be closed off if your child needed medication for, cancer or whatever else is quote unquote more acceptable to have in our society, right? Like the society has sort of decided for us, like which things are acceptable to struggle with and get medication for, and which ones are not, and which ones are stigmatized.
Sinus infection.
Yes.
You would get medication.
Yes. I would say be open to it, but be cautious. And the psychiatrists that my son has seen many over the years for various reasons, we had to change a few times. But the good psychiatrists he's had took at least an hour. The first psychiatrist that ever gave him medication was with him for 2 hours. It was a 2-hour session. Same thing with this last person he saw. It was about like an hour and a half or so, this latest one that he's been with for a while now. Please don't let someone diagnose your kid in the first 5-10 minutes. I would walk out of that office so fast. Find a good doctor. And then again, make sure your kid is in therapy, and make sure that that it's a psychiatrist who's going to keep seeing your kid and monitoring medication, because medication needs to be adjusted. Sometimes what works for one person doesn't work for another. Sometimes medication can have bad side effects that make things worse. Psychotropic medication is very, very, very complicated. But I would say be cautious, but be open. Medication can save a life. It's really, really important. I just would never want a parent to. I had somebody, I just read it to you before this, we started recording today. I had someone DM me on Instagram and say, I didn't want to give my 12-year-old, 12, 13, I don't remember the age, medication, but he has suicidal thoughts, and we put him on herbal medicine, and he actually got worse. I'm not saying herbal medicine is going to make things worse. For this particular case, it made things worse, and she's scared she's going to lose her kid. My gosh, take him to a really great psychiatrist. Ask for referrals. The way I found the psychiatrist for my kid, I went to his pediatrician and I said, tell me the best psychiatrist you've ever worked with. And just get a recommendation, and then please only take advice or a prescription from somebody who has spent a significant amount of time with you and your child to really get to know their situation. Okay, a couple more things I want to touch on that I feel like people can do right now in this moment to help a kid who is struggling. Just like I said earlier that, catch them doing good. I think it's really good to give kids, any kid of any age, but again, especially if a kid is struggling, an opportunity to make themselves proud. Okay. Because depression is a liar. And depression will make you feel like you're a loser and you're a failure and you're worthless. And making them feel like they have something to offer, making them proud of themselves is so empowering. Even for adults who are struggling with depression, if they feel like they have something to offer, they feel like they matter. My gosh, the number one thing you hear usually from people who are suffering with severe depression is, I don't matter. How can we make our kids feel like they matter? I've often told parents, ask your kid for advice. Not about stuff that's inappropriate and, would stress them out, but like ask them for advice on just how to handle little things in life or whatever. Just find ways to make them proud of themselves. I think that is huge. Instead of constantly seeing it as a problem we have to fix, how about we see it as like empowering them? Because the more empower them, the more they will seek help and they will want help, right? And then a question that I started asking my son all the time, and now he does not live at home, and I still often will text him this or call him and ask him, how can I best support you today? And we'll do a whole separate episode on control. I often came from a place of control because my fear of losing him and not knowing how to help him threw me into just trying to control everything. And what I realized is that in every interaction with my kid, I have a choice whether I'm going to control or I'm going to connect. I cannot do both. And to me, that question, how can I best support you today, feels like a love that is free of control. I'm not trying to control a situation. I'm just here to show you that I love you unconditionally. And it's also a way to do that thing we talked about where we empower them. I want you to trust yourself. I want you to trust yourself that you know what you need. And then I am here to walk alongside you and support you and love you through it. How can I best support you today? Okay, we're going to leave with that, but please, if you have any specific questions that you want to ask, you can call and leave a voicemail at...
The phone number to call is 855-912-4175, and you can leave Kristina a quick message with your question, and she might answer it.
We might play it on a future podcast. And also for any sort of just support, like you need that best friend at any time of the day who's going to help you process stuff, you can go to Hope and Humor Daily, my app. The chat is available 24/7 and you'll get an immediate response. And you can also find me at Kristina with a K, Kuzmic, I almost forgot my last name, K-U-Z-M-I-C, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, almost everywhere. Not Snapchat, not Tinder, not
no,
Snapchat,
no.
Hinge, Hutch, What's
Nope.
it called? Hinge?
I don't know.
I'm
I don't know any of
very
those things.
happily married.
Yes.
I don't even know why I said that. You know why? Perimenopause, brain fog. I'm tired. I love you all. Go write some Post-its for your kids right now. Go. Put them all over the house.